Hello again. Once upon a time, long ago, there lived on Earth not one kind of human, but four. One of these was brutish and ape-like, but the others were rather like us, although they were not able to do much of any great interest. Some could make crude clothes out of animal skins and decorated themselves with feathers and beads made from shells. They also made rudimentary geometric patterns by scratching rocks or painting a few straight lines on the walls of caves. This, though, was the utmost limit of their creativity. In what would one day be called Europe lived men and women who had the glimmerings of religious belief. They built shrines and enacted rituals when they buried their dead. Today we know them as the Neanderthals. In the continent we call Africa now were other people with similar abilities, and they are commonly known by the Latin name of Homo sapien. It's possible, but by no means certain, that the glacially slow technological and cultural progress made by those in Africa and others in Europe and Asia might one day have led to civilization. New developments for those people, though, took place on a timescale of hundreds of thousands of years, and it's equally likely that these primitive humans would, over the course of many millennia, have remained at the same level or perhaps even regressed. One of their forebears, a species called Homo erectus, continued to use the same kind of stone tool with no improvements for a staggering period of over 1,000,000 years. There was nothing inevitable or even especially likely about any of these species eventually emerging as sentient beings. Then, roughly 50,000 years ago, something remarkable happened. Groups of explorers from what is now Africa left their own territory in search of food, perhaps, or even adventure, and following the coast found themselves in a new land, one which was inhabited by strange people, barely recognisable to them as being human. This was modern-day Israel. All the same, they traded with these peculiar individuals and also fought with them at other times. Something else happened too. Although the women didn't look anything much like their own wives and daughters, some young men took lovers from these new and unfamiliar tribes, often by force and at other times because, despite the barrier of mutual incomprehensibility, some spark of attraction was kindled. Women from the newcomers also had liaisons with those they met in the land in which they were now making their home, and in the course of time babies were born who shared half their characteristics with each of their parents. It was obvious that the children born from this first generation of mixed couplings were special. They were sharper, brighter, more adventurous and more daring than either of the groups from whom they had sprung. They were natural leaders, having more and better ideas than any of their contemporaries. Perhaps there was some little prejudice against them to begin with, as is not uncommonly the case with children of mixed heritage, but by the time they had grown to maturity, their capabilities were so glaringly plain that they acceded almost as a matter of course to the leadership of their various families and clans. Not that this was sufficient to satisfy their ambitions. They were not content to stay in one place, doing things in the same way that they had been done for generations, in fact for thousands, tens of thousands of generations. After centuries of increasingly frequent interbreeding, groups of these hybrids, led by the most intelligent and resourceful, began spreading out northeast and west from what is now the Middle East. They carried with them a vital genetic inheritance, which they would pass down to their own children. Not all the characteristics which had been acquired through mating were of use to them. The shape of the skull, proportion to the body and so on were of no importance, and as the hybrids started to rely more on their own tribes for sexual partners, so those Neanderthal traits slowly faded until only a small part of the genome of the original inhabitants of that part of the world was retained. most vital were two genes which gave an enhanced ability to the brain. Within a few thousand years, with the blink of an eye compared with the time scale to which past changes had been measured, the hybrids had become transformed into what was almost a new species. The difference between this emergent breed and those which had gone before was breathtaking. The sort of art produced by the Homo sapiens before they left Africa was nothing more than doodles consisting of scratches signifying little other than perhaps a vague awareness of the concept of symmetry. In what would one day become Europe, the Neanderthals who lived there before the coming of the hybrids were also producing similar random scratches and the occasional pattern of straight lines painted on the wall of a cave. Within a few years of the arrival of the hybrids, though, something extraordinary was happening. Sculptures and paintings were appearing created by humans on a completely different intellectual plane from those who had gone before. Take the figure known as the Lion Man, which dates from that time. You can easily Google Lion Man from Germany and see it. It's carved out of bone and it shows a human figure with the head of a lion. It is representative rather than merely decorative. It is meant to portray something. Not only that, it is meant to show us something not in the real world, but a figure which existed only in the mind of the creator. Neither he or she had ever seen a man with the head of a lion. It had been imagined, and then the pure thought had somehow been made manifest for all to see. This achievement, showing in solid form an image which had been conjured up in another person's mind, showed the immeasurable gulf which separated these new Europeans from their ancestors. The new breed of humans took the world by storm, and as they spread out across Asia and Europe, innovation and invention became their hallmark. They began building permanent homes, growing crops, and before long the stage was set for the rise of civilization. The aboriginal inhabitants of the continents which they invaded were wholly unable to compete with the incomers. Those older species whom we know today as the Neanderthals, Denisovans and Homo erectus were outclassed on all levels and quietly faded away. The human population which had stayed behind in Africa simply stagnated. Over the next 50,000 years, in which the hybrids moved from the Stone Age to the Industrial Revolution, with its steam engines, blast furnaces and telegraphs, the rootstock of modern humanity, the original Homo sapiens, remained for the most part in the Stone Age, where they were when the first explorers entered the Middle East and encountered for the first time their Neanderthal cousins. It does not take a very extensive grasp of history to see that no human invention since the stone hand axe and possibly the bone harpoon for fishing originated in Africa. The harpoon, which might first have been devised in Africa, has been around for over 35,000 years. Since that time, nothing more has been invented by the original Homo sapiens in their homeland. Everything, from the wheeled cart and written word to jet planes and smartphones, has been invented by those whose origins lie in Europe. The population of unadulterated Homo sapien, which has lived in Africa for perhaps as long as 200,000 years, has not come up with any new ideas since the Stone Age. The matter is not quite as simple as this because, of course, those Neanderthal genes are found not only in Europe but across the whole of Asia, Australasia and the Americas too. What is it which marks Europe out as the cultural and technological powerhouse which has for the last 40,000 years or so provided the driving force for the advance of civilization? After all, the indigenous inhabitants of China and Papua New Guinea also have Neanderthal DNA. The idea of those living in the jungles of New Guinea coming up with the idea of calculus or quantum computers is an improbable one, and yet they have more Neanderthal genes than people in Europe. Those whose origin lies in Asia and Australasia have something else, of course, beside their Neanderthal ancestry. They also have another lot of genes from an archaic human species which is wholly lacking from Europeans. The cousins of the Neanderthals, we know now as the Denisovans, they were very widespread across Asia, ranging from Siberia and Tibet in the north, all the way down to Indonesia. Those Homo sapiens emerging from Africa 50,000 years ago picked up Neanderthal genes in the Middle East before heading off in all directions. Naturally enough, as they moved into Europe, they encountered only more Neanderthals, but those who headed east and northeast found themselves entering territory occupied by the Denisovans. So it was that after having interbred for generations with the Neanderthals, these bands then moved into Asia and began repeating the process with the Denisovans. For some reason, the combination of Neanderthal and Denisovan genes did not appear to be so advantageous as Neanderthal genes alone. Neither the Chinese nor the Indians or inhabitants of Indonesia seemed to have the drive for innovation and exploration possessed by the Europeans, who lacked this Denisovan inheritance. The more Denisovan DNA, which was inherited, the less resourceful and innovative seemed to be the populations. The varying combination and proper proportions of DNA from the archaic human species appears to have affected ethnic groups in certain ways. People from East Asia, who inherited a good deal more Neanderthal DNA than those in Europe, leavened with small quantities of Denisovan genes, tend to score higher in intelligence tests than Europeans, and to do very well academically. There is very little history, though, of original inventions in that part of the world. The Chinese, Taiwanese, Japanese and Koreans are excellent at developing and improving other people's inventions and finding ways of mass producing them quickly and cheaper, but they do not have a very extensive history of producing new ideas for themselves. Apart from gunpowder and paper, most people would be hard-pressed to name a single Chinese invention. They are without doubt good at copying ideas such as transistor radios, DVD players and mobile telephones, but not coming up with the original concepts. This may be connected with the way in which the differing genetic amounts of DNA which those from East Asia have compared with Europeans. There can be no doubt that the modern world is largely a creation of European civilization, culture and technology. It would perhaps be more accurate to say European and Middle Eastern, because of course Jews and Arabs also seem capable of that quality of questing and original thought which is such a prominent historical feature of Europeans. We reflect that Arabs and Jews too are the recipients only of Neanderthal DNA, and that, like Europeans, this is not modified or affected by the presence of Denisovan genes.